Well, and something that was funny that Chris said a lot to me when we were young, newly married was, uh, don't assume.
Is what happens when you assume.
You make an ass out of you and me. So there were a lot of times I assumed because I thought he should do this. He should do that because he's the man. He should be paying the bills. He should be mowing the lawn. He should be fixing this. I didn't talk to him about it because I thought he should take care of these things.
Hi, everybody. This is Marriage Tested.
Love approved.
I'm Chris.
I'm Kendle.
And we are the Salisburys. So thanks again for joining us. Here we are, episode 3. So cranking along. And part of our new format or segment that we wanted to do, and we'll do it again, is our approved and denied. So this is kind of the highlights, lowlights of the week, what we liked, what we didn't like, happened, didn't happen. So we're going to jump into that. So Kendle, what was your approved and denied?
Okay, so I'll start off kind of the denied or kind of low part of it. Right now, I'm kind of dealing with some chemo brain. I think a lot of people probably have heard of that before, but sometimes I forget things. My words don't come out clearly, and you might see that as we're doing our podcast. It's been super frustrating. I want to do this podcast with Chris, but sometimes my words get a little jumbled. I see it clearly in my brain, but my words are not as clear as I'd really like. So that's been super frustrating. So I hope you're all patient with me as I try to work through this realistic, chemo brain fog and whatever this is called.
I know it drives you crazy.
It's very, very hard. Very hard. So,
I mean, you were a special educator. You knew the law like cold. You knew it. And I know this drives you bonk.
yeah, it's been very hard because I'm like, I see things clearly. I want to say it. And sometimes the words don't come out. So.
Sometimes you do order the same thing on Amazon a bunch of times. So that's kind of fun.
Yes. Yeah. Or I repeat myself. So I'm working on it. So that's kind of the low light. The positive, I would say, is kind of finding this new purpose in my life. So recently I've stopped working due to my cancer diagnosis and the treatments and just trying to find a new purpose as I'm at home now. And really this podcast has been super positive, just doing things with friends, making new friends, doing yoga now. So just really finding new purpose has been really an exciting thing for me, and being able to travel, doing things that I love.
I love it. I love that the podcast, I love watching your light kind of come back and the energy. And I know this was tough for you of letting go of your special ed career since you were 15 years old.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I remember you saying, I can't just be the cleaning lady. I can't be a maid. Like, what is my purpose?
Yeah.
And so that's a big reason why we did this podcast. And I love it. And this new chapter, and that's how we kind of embrace life. This is a new chapter for us. So let's roll with it and live our best life. So it's been really neat, honey, to watch you kind of reemerge, because I know that was hard.
Well, and I've been an advocate for children with special needs pretty much most of my life. And so kind of shifting that, where how can I continue to be an advocate? Now I really want to be an advocate for those that have stomach cancer. So being able to go to Washington, D.C. and meeting with, senators and representatives to try to get more funding and pre-screenings for stomach cancer. I really would like to be more of an advocate for those that need it.
It's a big deal. And I love watching you embrace that and be another voice that's needed.
I appreciate it. You've been a great supporter for me.
So for my approved and denied, I'll start with denied as well. Lately, it's been a lot of stress. a lot of stress at work, a lot of frustration, even some anger, how to balance these different emotions. Like for Valentine's, you weren't feeling well. That's been really hard. And I've really emotionally, I've been battling a lot and really trying to process it. Pickleball helps, but how do I balance these different elements? And part of it too is I just feel helpless. Like on Valentine's, your stomach was really upset. You were in a lot of pain, and there wasn't a lot I could do other than let you rest. And sometimes how I deal with frustration that was a definite denied this past week. Interestingly, on my approved, 2024 is one of the toughest years personally, and even as a couple we've had, as we've gone through cancer. And then even with my job, we were acquired by a different company, a lot of challenges, but it actually ended with the best of my professional career. The results, what we accomplished, the company I was working for at the time, Pagero, was such a highlight, and it was an amazing way to end that chapter of my career with the best results I've ever had. Which was
Absolutely. That was such a great company, and I know how much you loved working with them.
And the people, it was awesome. So it was a really neat way to end that. So that was my approve. For this episode, as you probably know, because we're now in episode 3, we try to have a topic. And part of it is to kind of give us some structure of how we share our stories, but also we really do want to help people. And it's been amazing, some of the responses we've got and how some things that we've talked about has impacted them or created conversations in a way that we didn't anticipate. So we're going to talk about a pretty big one. I think this is another key one. Last week was communication. This one is somewhat interrelated, but it's about expectations and having expectations for yourself and also for your spouse in your marriage and how to navigate those.
This was a hard one for us, especially as we started kind of our journey in marriage. And know that we bring up these topics because they were ones that we went through and we still do, trying to understand and figure out kind of those expectations, especially early in our marriage. And we had some big ones that we kind of dealt with during our honeymoon and during our first year of marriage. And Chris is going to kind of explain what happened and an experience we had during our honeymoon.
And it's taken years. I mean, we'll be the first to say we're not perfect. We're still working on this stuff. And some things took a long time to work through. And in some cases, it wasn't just fix it and move on. You have to continually work on it. So one quick experience from our honeymoon was the jet skis. So we were in Cancun, beautiful place. And actually the weather was phenomenal. It was bloody hot. I remember that. It was June, so it was almost July. It was really, really hot. But we planned this excursion to go on these jet skis.
To go snorkeling.
Yeah, to go snorkeling. And they had all these jet skis lined up, and the tour guide asked which one, and you just grabbed one. He said, let's use this one. And I went with it. And sure enough, we get going, and we were on the lagoon side, and we were going towards the ocean, and our jet ski was lame. It was choking. It wasn't going as fast. And then I think it barely made it. We didn't go very far. And I got really upset. And this is kind of a common theme, but when stuff breaks, I get frustrated. And in my mind's eye and my perspective was I wanted everything to be perfect. It's a honeymoon. We're in Cancun. I had unrealistic expectations. And I look back on it and it was stupid. Why I put this on such a pedestal or had such a vision of what this was going to be like. And so when it started to fall apart, I got ticked off, and I even got upset with you.
Yeah.
But it was all about, I just want this to be perfect. And it was super dumb. But having unrealistic expectations to a degree kind of ruined that moment. And so that's how I felt about it. How did you feel about it?
Well, we talked about this experience and we realized we really had two different perspectives of it. So when they asked us which jet ski we wanted, Chris didn't really say anything. So I looked at both jet skis and one was a little bigger than the other. So in my mind, this is my perspective, I was thinking this one of the jet ski was bigger So here, Chris is 6'6" and I'm 5'11". We probably should pick this one. So I just said, why don't we take this one? Not thinking anything of it. I was just thinking of Chris, thinking we should take this bigger one. So we did. But then when it started having problems, all of a sudden Chris turned around and started getting upset with me, saying, why did you pick this one? We should have taken the other one, and was becoming very angry and upset about it. And that was very difficult. It was hard because how would I know? And that's what I said to him. I'm like, how would I know that this would have problems?
And it was kind of our first fight, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
on our honeymoon, which wasn't great.
I felt really bad because how would I know that would have problems? But in my mind, I was thinking, of him thinking getting a bigger jet ski would make him feel more comfortable, that it would maybe have more horsepower or something like that. But in the end, it did have more problems. They did end up getting us another jet ski, and then we went and got to snorkel and everything was fine. But realizing once we talked about it, that he had kind of a different perspective.
And that's what irritates me now is it worked out. They got us a different jet ski. Crap happens. Shit happens in life. Things are not going to go, in fact, rarely go the way you want them to. And I don't know if it was immaturity or just I had built up, I think that was part of it. I had built up this amazing, perfect honeymoon, and wrongly so, when it didn't go that way, I got mad. I shouldn't have blamed you. And we've kind of learned too, is like when we're frustrated or those expectations aren't met, I now say, it's not you, honey, it's the situation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm upset at this situation or I'm frustrated with it. It's not you, but that took us a while to get to. So, and I think that's kind of a good way to say our background, again, coming into it, what were our expectations for each other and for marriage?
Well, and that's when we started talking about kind of our expectations. It was really interesting to kind of look back and see that for me, growing up with a single mom and then growing up in the LDS church, those expectations were just get married in the LDS temple. And then, you'll be married for eternity. There weren't a lot of like what happens after you get married. It was kind of like what kind of wife you should be, but what happens in that relationship. And I really wish that would have been addressed more. Because I had a single mom. We really didn't ever talk about that other than like what kind of guy I should find. One that was ambitious or had a good job. There were specific things like that, but not having sort of that example of a married couple was difficult. And so sort of those expectations were unrealistic when I started a marriage.
And you were surrounded by women for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's true.
you didn't even see how couples would interact often, right? You didn't have a lot of that.
Yeah. And some of that was just movies, TV. And so I just thought, well, once I get married, I'll live happily ever after. Isn't that really what the fairy tale tells us? That everything will be fine. So when Chris got upset with me, that was really my first kind of interaction with the male that really got upset with me. And I just didn't know how to handle that. And so I just got quiet and we just kind of went on the excursion, and that was the end of it. We really didn't address it or talk.
And I'm a big dude, and I still don't realize how scary I can be, I guess, when I get upset. I still don't. I don't realize how other people see it or they're impacted by it. But for my upbringing and where I came from, I did have a lot of examples. My parents were married. My grandparents were still married on both sides. Like, the church was obviously a really big influence, but a really key thing impacted my life and impacted you. And that was, I served an LDS mission, and I was playing college baseball at the time. I decided to go. They called me to South America. And within 5 months of being in country, I got deathly ill. And we'll talk about this down the road in some other episodes of our podcast, because there's some deeper stuff here. But essentially, I came home in a wheelchair. They had to wheel me out in the airport. I couldn't even walk. I was so sick.
Well, and you lost a lot of weight. What, within a month, you lost how many
Oh,
pounds?
30 pounds. And I was skinny anyway. If you saw the pictures of me, and actually, this is the really ironic part, slight tangent, but when I came home and I went to the University of Utah Medical Center and they thought I had cancer. I remember the nurses walking out saying he probably has leukemia.
Mm.
And I heard it and I was just devastated. I also remember another missionary was in the waiting room with me. He had testicular cancer. And I didn't realize at the time, but cancer was was going to be
Big-
part of my life. Yeah.
Oh.
And it was a big time concern. But the biggest part and I call it chasing the ghost. Previous to my mission, I had a lot of success. School was easy. I was on scholarship, playing baseball, had a lot of success. And all of a sudden I came home a total failure. So for me, I was now chasing an unrealistic expectation of who I should have been as a person. And I was bringing that into our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really hard for me because I wanted things to be better and they weren't. And so I now see that as a huge, and it's taken me a long time. I know I kind of went a little longer on this, but this was a big thing for us and for me.
Well, and you bring up a great point. You said should. And that was something that we dealt with a lot in our marriage where we were saying, you should do this. You kind of those, again, goes back to those unrealistic expectations of the should.
I effing hate the word should. We don't need that in our marriage. We don't need that in the English language. Should is projecting unfairly.
Well, and something that was funny that Chris said a lot to me when we were young, newly married was, don't assume.
Is what happens when you assume?
You make an ass out of you and me. So there were a lot of times I assumed because I thought he should do this. He should do that because he's the man. He should be paying the bills. He should be mowing the lawn. He should be fixing this. I didn't talk to him about it because I thought he should take care of these things. A funny story that happened when we were newly married is I thought since he was the man, he should be paying the bills. And then one day,
I should have actually. I should have been paying.
No, not necessarily. But one day I got into his car and I realized that there were some of our bills in the back seat of his car. And I'm like, what's going on? Why are they back there? And he's like, oh, I forgot. And I'm like, well, they need to be paid. So I said, why don't I take care of that? So I started paying the bills. And I was fine with that. But it was something that we realized we needed to communicate and talk about it. But expectations, did he have to pay the bills? Did he have to do those things? No, not necessarily. We had to compromise and talk about what kind of those expectations were. And once we did, then our credit score went up, our bills were paid on time, and so things worked out much better.
And I like that I could have just dug in my heels because my dad always did the bills. Grandpa always did the bills. But each couple has strengths and weaknesses and different things that they can bring to the marriage. And one of the things about expectations is who gives a crap what other people think? Who cares what works for someone else? What works for you? What works for me? What works for us? That's the key part. And even more so, I'm really big on this. I think unspoken expectations are lethal to a relationship.
Yes, very much so.
Because if I'm expecting that you should do something and I don't tell you, then you don't do it because how would you know? Or you're not doing it to the level I want, then that's a fail. And I start getting upset.
You're disappointed. And sometimes I would be disappointed or vice versa. And neither of us knew why, because it was not spoken.
And that can be a real wedge, what happens is people retreat into their corners and feel attacked, feel undervalued or not valued, feel taken advantage of. I mean, these are common things in a marriage, but I really think it's because we're not speaking what the expectation are. And in a lot of cases, the expectation either is unrealistic or just not appropriate, or maybe it's spot on, but we don't know it.
Yeah. Well, and something that's been fun for us is because we now talk about sort of those expectations or things that we do like and want to do is like Chris likes to cook. And I'm totally okay with him cooking. He's a fantastic chef. So now, are the roles that a man should do this or a woman should do this? I'm totally okay.
Who cares?
It doesn't matter. Yeah. But it's something that we decided together as a couple that many nights he's the chef. He cooks. And I love it.
I love to serve. I don't know why, but I love cooking, especially barbecue. Barbecue's my thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to lie. I'm really good.
He's fantastic.
But that's what works for us.
Mm-hmm.
That's what works for us. One other key thing about speaking the expectations is they have to be mutually agreed.
Yeah.
So if it's Chris, you're going to do the cooking and the barbecue, but you want to cook too, then we have to find a compromise.
I can't just say, I expect you to cook all the time. We have to decide that together.
And once we mutually agree, then it becomes much, much easier.
Mm-hmm.
But if it changes, then we have to come back to each other and say, okay, something's changed. And this happens all the time. It's not like it's a one and done. But if it changes, then say, okay, how do we mutually agree again, reset expectations, and then we can move forward. Because if it doesn't work for both of us, then it doesn't work.
Well, we're a partnership. So we have to just make those decisions together. So, and that was something I did have to learn at the beginning of our marriage. We were partners in this. I wasn't just a single independent woman anymore. I had a partner and I had to make those decisions together, and we had to set those expectations and work on it as a team.
Well, and here we are in a newer chapter. Again, cancer impacts a lot of our daily routine, what we plan kind of revolves around cancer. And so for us, we have to constantly check in with each other. Does this work for you? Does this not work for you? Do you like this? Do you not like this? We're kind of forced to do it, which again, I'm grateful for, but we have to speak it. And if it's unrealistic, then we say, no, that's not going to work. Let's find something else. So things will continue to change in your relationship. Maybe it's illness. Maybe it's a job loss. Maybe it's trouble with kids. And what worked before may not work now. So you come together, and that's probably the call to action for this episode for our listeners and our followers.
I think that's a great idea. So why don't you share what our call to action is?
So thank you for just tossing it right back on me. Well, I think it'll be fun for a lot of the couples. Are your expectations unrealistic as you talk with your spouse? And the unspoken ones, I dare people to do the unspoken ones, the ones that you're thinking in your head, but do I say this? Do I not say this?
This might be a hard conversation.
It might be. But make it safe and just say, you can say whatever it is. I'm not going to take it personal. This is not a criticism. This is what I'm thinking.
Yes.
I dare our followers to do the unspoken. And I want to hear, were you aligned? Were there some surprises? What I'm really hoping, like it has with us, is in a lot of cases, I'm much more harsh on myself than I am for you. And in a lot of ways, I'm trying to chase things that aren't necessary, and you're way more forgiving and patient. But it really does become fun when you align expectations. It gets easier. It really, really does.
Well, and just before we end, I'm just going to throw out actually something that's kind of silly, a little expectation, is the toothpaste. Because of kind of my cancer journey, I have neuropathy in my hands and my feet. So opening things has been difficult for me. One thing that's really hard is opening a toothpaste lid. And Chris is one that puts the lid on pretty hard. So I have a hard time opening the toothpaste lid, which you would think is like not a big deal at all. But my expectation is, please, like, don't put it on so hard. But I had to discuss this with him, what my expectation was. But if I don't talk to him about it, because for a little while, it was really frustrating me. because he just continually put this lid on hard and I could not get the darn lid off. And I'm like, I'm just trying to brush my freaking teeth and I can't get this lid off. But I realized if I don't discuss this with him, it's never going to be addressed.
I can absolutely guarantee I had no.
He had no idea. And I mean, yes, it's such a stupid little thing, but it really affected me.
I can think that's a great example. It sounds small, but it's big.
Yeah.
And I had no, and
He had no idea.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Another one, and we just talked about this tonight, is rubbing your feet, right? Like your feet hurt a lot because of the neuropathy. And if I'm not meeting that expectation, right? Sometimes unknowingly, it's not on purpose, but there's times you're like, honey, I need you to rub my feet.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and even tonight, you're like, I need you to do this more often. So just a couple fun examples where even the small things can build up, but you got to speak them. If not,
Yeah.
your feet hurt and you can't brush your teeth, and that's hell.
Well, and you don't want to be resentful. You don't want it to build up where you do resent your partner or you start feeling like, oh, my partner doesn't care about something. Like, how silly for me to continually try to open this toothpaste lid or become resentful of Chris, thinking he doesn't care or he's putting it on hard just so that I can't open this stupid toothpaste lid. Absolutely, that's not the case. But how quickly we were able to resolve it once I talked to him a few times. Maybe I had to remind him. And that's really what all it was, is he just didn't even think about it. But once we did talk about it, we were able to resolve it. And now it's not a big deal. Anyway, we appreciate you guys listening. We are excited to kind of hear what are some of your expectations that you guys discussed and then how you kind of resolved them. So we look forward to hearing from you. Please check us out on our different social media apps. And until next week.
If you like what you're hearing so far, share it with your friends and family. All right. Well, this is Marriage Tested.
Love approved.
Until next time.
Bye.